didn't go very far. And then about a year or two later, in part because the internet was becoming more, kind of routine, and in part because he stumbled across these markup languages that he could kind of build HTML on top of, he started building the web in earnest in the late 80s. And it wasn't until he got to that stage, about 6 years into the project, that he finally went to his bosses and said, hey, I may have invented a new global communications medium on the side. Can this be my day job now? I feel like I work on this full time. And that's what we're hoping for from all of you at Outside In. If that works. Just let us know, please. And what's important about that story is that he didn't set out to invent a new global communications medium from the start, right? If his ambition had been that big at the beginning, he probably would have never gotten past day one. He started small, started with a kind of a personal need and interest, and for whatever reason he had that kind of sensibility, and he had a work environment where he was able to keep this alive for a long period of time. Apparently Twitter is similar. Apparently Jack Dorsey, his telling of Twitter is that he had this. He was fascinated with, I think, emergency vehicles reporting their statuses as a kid. Like, we're here, like we just arrived at 13th Street, and somehow, like, the kind of status update thing was, like, in his head from a very long time, from when he was, like, 7 or something like that. And he had sketched out an early prototype of what became Twitter, something like 2001 or something like that. And so, for whatever reason, he had this kind of interest and sensibility that he kept alive for a long time until the external world was ready for it on some level, until he was in the right organization, or he was around the right people, or he had the right backing, or the technology had matured so that he was able to kind of build this thing. If he tried to build it in 2001, I don't know, it might not have worked out. You needed to have an SMS involvement of it. You probably needed more people using SMS at that time. You didn't have enough people, whatever the kind of differences are. He kept the idea alive until the time was right for it. So that's one big principle. And part of the question as an organization is, how do you keep those kinds of punches alive over time in the people working in the organization? And how do you create environments where those serendipitous collisions can happen? In the book I talk a lot about, and I talked about this in the last book, Invention of Air, the coffee house in the 18th century. Big engine of innovation in the age of enlightenment. Coffee house, like almost every big breakthrough idea has a kind of coffee house somewhere in the story. It drove the kind of intellectual activity in the Enlightenment much more than the university system did, much more than the kind of private corporation did. And it was because it was a space where people would get together and they would hang out, they would drink way too much coffee, and they would kind of throw ideas around. And it was a very kind of multidisciplinary space where people would kind of come in and they would talk about religion, and they would talk about politics, and they would talk about new business models, and they would talk about science. And it was precisely because it was people talking about their passions, talking about their hobbies, talking about their hunches, and interesting collisions were more likely to happen in that kind of environment because it wasn't too organized. In the book I call this the liquid network, right? It's not so structured and formal and locked in place that nothing ever changes, and it's not so chaotic that nothing ever sticks, right? You want to get into that kind of fluid zone where surprising new combinations can happen, but when something does happen that's interesting, it actually has some durability and stick around. For organizations trying to figure out how to do this systematically, the problem with a lot of companies, particularly big companies, I think this is less true of startups, startups are almost naturally liquid networks because it's small enough, it's kind of a permanent coffee house. Big organizations have this problem where, like, in encouraging innovation, and I've been seeing a lot more of this since I wrote this book because I've been talking to a lot of these big companies, their attitude is, once a year, they have the, like, innovation retreat, and they go off into the woods, and they do trust falls, and they brainstorm, and they brainstorm. And then, like, the next day, it's like, all right, everybody, back to work. We'll see you all next year for our creativity day, And, it's fun, and it's probably good for morale, but it doesn't do a lot for innovation precisely because the good ideas have to be kind of aligned so that they all show up that one 24-hour period, and the one brainstorming session you have where everybody's trying to be creative actively, most ideas aren't in sync with other ideas. So the better approach is to try and figure out ways to kind of keep those innovation channels running all the time in the background, in some sense. And there are approaches like Google has 20% time idea where people are kind of working on their private projects, and there are interesting kind of idea sharing networks and services where people can suggest ideas and vote them up and down, things like that. So there are a lot of mechanisms trying to create that kind of background channel that's always running, where those new ideas can live, is a really important thing. And the other thing that I think is really key is creating that kind of diversity. So there was a really interesting study by this guy, Martin Roy from Stanford Business School, a couple years ago, where he looked at unusually innovative people in the corporate world and entrepreneurs, and he compared it to a cohort of people who were, to put it nicely, less innovative in their careers, and which has decided the experiment that you don't want to be invited to participate in. When they call you up and say, "You seem very dull. Answer some questions, please." And what he was looking at was their social networks. I think this was about 8 years ago, so this was not their Facebook and Twitter social graphs, but their actual friends, right? And so he looks at their social networks, and what he ends up finding is that there's a very clear and signature pattern in the networks of the innovators, and that is that they are friends with a much more diverse range of professions, right? So they work in an ad agency, but they know an architect and a plumber and a popular science writer and a government contract lawyer and a poet, right? Whereas the less innovative person in the ad agency just knows other people who work in ad agencies, right? And it makes a lot of sense. It's basically the kind of like the coffee house model of innovation, which is to say, if you surround yourself with people who are working on different kinds of projects, you'll have drinks with somebody, and you're the ad agency person, and you're talking to your architect friend, and there's something about the way that the architect guy works with his clients that triggers some association with the way that your agency works with their clients, and you can kind of port that idea over into your own domain and turn it into something kind of new and useful in a different context. So in a way, it's the non-political argument for diversity, right? It's not just that we'll be better, more tolerant as a society if we surround ourselves with people who are different from us. It's actually that we will be smarter on some level. We'll have more original thoughts if we surround ourselves with a more diverse pool of people. And I think that's one thing that we can do both in terms of social media and in terms of our physical work environments, right? We can make an effort to follow people, on Facebook, or connect with people on Facebook or follow people on Twitter who work in different fields. I get a lot out of the kind of the past links that I get from people that I follow on Twitter, and I try and follow kind of an interesting mix of people, not just tech people, and to see what that interesting mix of people is reading every day, not just to hear what they're having for breakfast, but like what they're actually, the stories they're reading longer form because they're sending the links around. That's a hugely valuable kind of input for me. I get a lot of new ideas and new kind of paths to explore because of that kind of input. It's all about making sure you're not just following people who are like you. And I think that's also an argument for a bit of what's happening in this space and in other spaces that are more formally co-working spaces, where you've got a bunch of different organizations under the same roof. And we're all more or less involved in the internet and mobile and things like that, but because there are a couple of different organizations here, there is that kind of nice diversity where people are working on different projects and not all kind of steering towards exactly the same goal. And yet you're sharing the physical space, which is really crucial. There's always something valuable in being around other people. And there are these other things I'm sure most of you know about, where co-working spaces where there's really no kind of parent organization. And it's some freelancers, it's some people working on a startup, it's some people between jobs, it's a slightly larger organization of people working for a big corporation that's based in another city. And those co-working spaces are really great incubators for new ideas because it's kind of this permanent coffee house where you're not so organized around one kind of corporate structure, but there's camaraderie and there's the shared physical space and all the stuff that you get from just being around other human beings. And so I think that's one thing that cities should be doing is supporting co-working spaces to allow that kind of fluidity and flexibility. The only other thing that I'd say that's off the point of the book, and I know some of you have read it, so I don't want to repeat too much, but the macro point I've been trying to make as I've been going around talking about it is to remind people that we have this assumption, I think, in our society that the marketplace is the sole driver of innovation. And that the reason why the marketplace is so good at coming up with new ideas and new products is because people are incentivized to make Zuckerberg-level fortunes, and they have competitive pressure with other firms to come up with things. And so that's why markets are such great innovators. And no doubt that is partially true. the idea of making $5 billion does concentrate the mind wonderfully, right? On the other hand, every time you think about new ideas in the context of markets, one of the problems you have is that you also have this desire to kind of protect your idea and make sure no one steals it because that's your, golden egg. And every time you do that, you limit the number of connections that idea can have. You limit the chance that that idea is going to collide with some other idea or your ability to build on somebody else's idea. One of the things that has made the web so innovative is that you have this amazing combination of a lot of money being made, but also a culture of openness and a culture where it is encouraged and very easy to build on top of other people's platforms. So Berners-Lee is building on top of the internet, and we're building on top of what Tim Berners-Lee did, and we're building on top of other people's APIs, and it's that kind of stack model of innovation that is really, really powerful. And some of that is done outside of the marketplace. No one owns the internet, nobody owns the web. And some of it is done very much in kind of commercial ventures, and sometimes it's done, as I think this company is done, with the idea that this company will make the world better, it will help communities share information better, it will give more power to the local experts in neighborhoods, but it will also be, a worthwhile financial venture for its investors and for the team. And it's that kind of balancing act where we recognize that open information architectures, where people are allowed to kind of share and build on other people's ideas, that there is an innovation power that comes from that side of the spectrum as well, and that it's not just about being proprietary. And the kind of slogan I use is that, we spend too much time thinking about how to protect our ideas and not enough time thinking about how to connect them, and that there is just as much, if not more, value to be made in for listen. Do we want to talk?
I have a question.
All right.
So you went and looked at some of the top innovations. You went back and looked at lots of innovations.
Right. Yeah.
Were there some that you found that were actually eureka moments?
Yeah, there are. It's hard. I mean, at the end of the book, I have this kind of classificatory scheme where I try and really figure out what ideas were truly collaborative, what ideas were truly non-market, what ideas were truly market-driven, and it's not an exact science. I think it's so useful to kind of map those things out to just get a sense.